Good afternoon and welcome. I call the first meeting of the 2025 House Budget Review Subcommittee on Primary and Secondary Education and Workforce Development to order. At this time, we'll have Jennifer call the roll.
Representative Bojanowski.
Here.
Representative Bowling. Representative Kleins.
Here.
Representative Bray. Representative Petrie. Representative Lewis.
Here.
And Representative Banta presiding.
Present. Okay. We are going to, today we have representatives from the Kentucky Department of Education presenting on the topic of the final SEEK for the fiscal year 2025. If these representatives would please come to the front table and identify themselves for the record.
Thanks so much. Dr. Robbie Fletcher, Commissioner of Education, and I'm in here in the support role for today with Matt Ross.
I'm Matt Ross. I'm the Associate Commissioner in the Office of Finance and Operations.
Jay Ritter, Division Director, Division of District Support.
Okay, great. Please proceed.
All right, thank you very much. Thanks again for the opportunity to come speak to you all.
Did you want to kick it off? No. Okay. So today we're going to talk about our SEEK final. And first off, I'd like to say that Katie is very appreciative of the investment that the General Assembly continues to make in education, public education in Kentucky. Oh, I'm sorry. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, good. Like I said, we're appreciative of the continued investment that you all make in education in Kentucky. What we're going to present to you today is how we come up with the SEEK estimate that is ultimately in your budget. It is basically a projection of what will happen a couple years in the future. And so it's sort of a complicated consensus building process, and we'll let Shay sort of run through our presentation. But another thing I think it's important to remember is that this really has nothing to do with the lawsuit that has been filed against the General Assembly against the Department of Education, we're a defendant too, around adequate funding for education. This is a separate conversation. This is about how we come up with that number for SEEK that goes in the budget, which is ultimately just it's a very sophisticated modeling process, but it is a projection into the future. So sometimes we're right, sometimes we're wrong. I think in the over history, I think it's been a shortfall 5 times, and I think this year we find ourselves in about a $14.7 million shortfall, and that is for parts of SEEK that are required to be paid, and then there's a additional $26 million that is either statutory or budget language that says should be paid if funds are available. So those funds are not available. So total shortfall of both combined is about $40.5 million. And with that, I'll let Shay just sort of launch into.
And before we get into that,
Sorry.
I'm sorry, Chair.
No, I just one quick question
Yes,
for you.
ma'am.
Yeah.
Have you ever projected higher and had extra funds?
Well, last year we had a excess. It's not, I don't think anything in the modeling really changed to sort of put our finger on any type of scale, but last year we returned, I think, $156 million into the general fund. So if you have an excess, the budget language dictates where that money goes. It's not, doesn't keep going through SEEK and going out to districts. If there is an excess of that SEEK amount, it goes back to wherever it's directed in the budget. Generally, the Budget Reserve Trust Fund. Sometimes it's gone back into school district transportation funding. Sometimes it's gone back into SEEK. It just really varies on what the budget language, how the budget language directs that funds.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And that was what I was going to add. Over the past 3 years, I think there's been an excess of nearly $250 million. Again, when you look at the numbers, for example, there's some things that we couldn't, that was projected. For example, and I'm sure this will be in the presentation, but we have more students than what were projected. I think around 4,000 students. The ELL population has exploded. We underestimated by almost 8,000 students there, approximately. Special needs has also increased tremendously as far as the number of students, and all these are SEEK inputs and add-ons in part of SEEK. But another thing too that if you look at is there's been a tremendous increase in the property value assessments over the past 2 or 3 years. So in this time, there was another projection of another large increase, but it wasn't to that point. So if there's less, in this, it's kind of an inverse relationship, then there's less local effort, which means there's more state effort. So if you look at it, most things were projected a little bit lower, or the main issues have been, whether it be in growth or other areas, but the property value assessments were inverse, because if you have a higher projection that comes in lower, then there has to be less local effort, more state effort. So again, this is, when we talk about the SEEK shortfall, what we're talking about is this is a consensus building process between the Office of State Budget Director and our people here at KDE, and we arrive at numbers on a very complex modeling. And of course, this modeling happened in the fall of 2023. Mm-hmm. So this is we're at the point now having to deal with what was projected in 2023. So with that being said, unless there's a question.
I have another question.
Yes, ma'am.
This is off topic, but you mentioned ELL. Mm-hmm. Has your population of ELL gone down any since the current administration's activeness?
I don't think we know that yet.
Not yet, but we'll see that at the end of the year, which way that number's gone.
Okay. Thank you.
Good question. Thank you.
Jay?
All right. I'm going to jump into this. First thing, obviously, most of you obviously are familiar with SEEK. It's when you look at it in totality, the SEEK that we're going to talk about today is specific to about $2.8 billion. The kind of the box that SEEK is in is about 3.2 when you look at the budget bill. So there's budget units, but there's one section just for the support education excellence in Kentucky, and overall it's about 3.2 billion. The difference is teachers' retirement is in that same chunk of the budget. So that is not obviously all that is spent on K through 12. I think if you add everything up, it's somewhere in the neighborhood of $11 billion, including local taxes on behalf and other funds, grants and things like that the General Assembly appropriates in the budget bill. So we, over time, I'm going to throw some years out and say 2015 or so, we started working with the state budget office, and this would be Mr. Hicks and his economist and their staff to help develop better numbers for our projections. We had a couple years where we, were a little uncomfortable with our own numbers, and we thought about working together a little more closely. We thought it would be a better process, and it, in fact, was a better process. The model belongs to the Office of State Budget Director. I think our role has always been to look at those numbers and work closely with them to sort of interject anything that's recent or that we know from working with our districts. Like, for example, JCPS may tell us we're expecting a large population of students to roll in at this time. We want to make sure that's in the model. If Cloverport starts a virtual school, we want to make sure that's in the model. Anything that we can predict, kind of like insurance, we want to make sure it's in that model. And in some cases, there are things, we'll talk about that a little bit, that we cannot predict that happen. Obviously, pandemics would be one of those, and having to freeze data and things like that. So there's a lot of things that impact that. These same SEEK inputs are used by the governor, the House, and the Senate to build their SEEK budget. We don't really throw a per pupil out there. Our numbers are really what I would say are the ingredients. And we're just handing those over to the governor's office, eventually the House and the Senate, and basically through your staff here at LRC and the staff at the Office of State Budget Director. So they will use multiple models, they being the Office of State Budget Director, to develop 20 years of this data and sort of trend this out. And keep in mind, we're doing this for the 2 years looking forward. So they'll build it. And in a conversation the other day with one of the economists, he said, what they're basically looking for is which model or models work best for each category that we're trying to estimate. We'll talk about those categories in a minute. But for example, property assessments, the model they use for that may not be the best model for exceptional child count. There's also factors such as Medicaid enrollment, poverty rolls, things like that would impact some of our numbers too. And they're looking a lot deeper than, say, a 20-year average. They have access, obviously, to all kinds of data that helps them develop not only this data, but data for Medicaid enrollment, data for corrections, revenues and expenditures, revenues for the state, all kinds of data. So they're sort of warehousing all this data to use to build this model. We review those estimates. We'll provide additional feedback. And if we, push a little bit in one direction or another, we usually try to work out, why do we think this number needs to go up, or if it's too high, why? And we'll usually come to a consensus agreement. This is all done, as Commissioner Fletcher said, usually in the fall of 23 for this current budget. And as you all know, you were here in 24 in January to work on the House budget and then eventually Senate. We're sort of out of it by then. We've handed all that over to staff over here. And it's a pretty lengthy process, as you know. Usually goes out until about March or April. And then, then we have our budget. So what we're estimating, property assessments, this is everything: real estate, tangible, and motor vehicles. This is rolled up into one big number. Obviously, the last couple of years, these numbers have been very erratic, very strong in some areas. I noticed the superintendent in the room, he's had insane growth in his district for real estate. These are numbers that were never expected 5, 6, 7 years ago. We used to think 4% was pretty outstanding growth. Now that's very minimal. We've seen 25% in some of the smaller districts for real estate growth. This is very hard to predict. Aggregate average daily attendance, this is red meat in the formula. This is a hugely important number. These are basically, where the kids are. Are they coming in from out of state? Are they leaving? We also will look at certain districts, especially the larger ones. If they're expecting, more kids, less kids, you'll have growth areas such as Warren, Bowling Green. Years ago, you would see Fayette and Jefferson grow a lot faster than they are now. But wherever there's economic development, you may all of a sudden, it may take a while, but you'll see growth in students. And that's what we're trying to predict as well. Free lunch count driven completely by poverty. And income. And so if you see an area that lands a great factory that's paying better, you may have less free lunch kids eventually, but it can take years for that to happen. Exceptional child count. This is one that we admittedly really have a hard time predicting. This number, as we're losing students in aggregate and total, this number continues to grow. And frankly, it grows very fast. And this is something that we've worked with the Office of State Budget Director, a lot of special ed directors, our own Office of Special Education, Early Learning, to try to understand why and how we can predict this better. This is what, yes, go ahead.
And also, too, if you see on the screen with the exceptional child count, for example, low incidence severe students have a higher factor that goes into the formula as opposed to the high incidence speech. So there's a lower add-on, if you will, for moderate and high incidence, whereas low incidence, your severe students, there is a larger add-on, if you will. There's a different factor for that. And so one of the big areas of our severe population, all these have increased, but the severe population's also increased, which means there's a larger factor that goes into that formula.
Yeah, it's about 10,000 and change for that severe student now. Home hospital, this number is sort of pretty stagnant. That these are those students, obviously, that cannot attend school. And then your limited English proficiency students, this population, again, maybe in the last 15 years, you've seen it grow in certain areas. Of course, Bowling Green and Warren County, significantly, JCPS, Fayette, Woodford, Shelby. And you'll see smatterings of these kids out in other districts. But usually there's chunks of them, larger populations in certain districts. Pretty predictable. But as well as, like you said earlier, they may leave, they may come in, and they may be here temporarily. It is kind of hard to pin that down.
And to add to that, if you look at Warren County and if you look at in Bowling Green, you're looking at over 120 different languages are being spoken in those schools.
Yeah.
I think Jefferson County is over 140 different languages at this point. So just the number of languages is almost overwhelming. It is overwhelming. But again, that's, part of that population.
So when we're looking at these estimates and, sadly waking up at 2 a.m. and thinking about how to estimate these, there are so many things that impact these. In my conversations with the Office of State Budget Director, we worry about all kinds of things: weather, birth rates, attendance percentage. That was a problem coming out of COVID. It sort of depressed our attendance of students. So, and getting them back in, which we do want them in school, but that increases the cost eventually of SEEK. Population shifts. We've seen this in Eastern Kentucky. Obviously, you'll see it in Bowling Green and Warren County, where those population centers people are moving towards for jobs. Illness is a very tricky one, almost impossible to predict. The flu is a little late this year, and if you go back, I think, to one of the years where we had a shortfall, the big reason behind it was a bad flu outbreak in the fall, and next year everyone's healthy. So it created a growth bubble, if you will, and that caught up with us. Economic development, which we all love, but it's also hard to predict where these places are going to land and where those populations move to. Tangible property transactions, practically everything impacts it. National, state, and local legislative changes. Anything as simple as a law passed that says this type of property is exempt, can't impact SEEK. And depending on when that's effective, it can impact either the current or looking forward. So we have to factor all that into our thought process when we start reviewing this. So apologies for the wonderful color choice here. I blame Matt, but I did this. But what I wanted to show is when we're working on the budget, on the left box there, we don't actually see actual data until that green box is the very first thing we'll see. So in the first year of SEEK, all that orange comes later. So we're predicting pretty far ahead. Of course, for the second year, it's very far ahead. In some cases, it's 6 to 18 months until we see actual data. So a question we always circle back with the Office of State Budget Director is, how did our estimates look? And, where were we off? And we have these conversations, I think, pretty much throughout the year to try to understand where we can do better as a group, or understanding, well, what happened here? And in some cases, we think, well, this is right on the money, let's not change it. But they'll still review it each and every time. We're not going to kind of sleep on a number and say, well, we're pretty good on this one. They do a thorough review of their models. It's very important to do that because things can change pretty quickly. So speaking of estimates, this is basically where we are now. Our ADA, we were within 0.2%. But that's also 5.8 million. And these numbers are a little large in context, but we're also looking at a, $3 billion pot of, calculations. At risk, pretty close. Exceptional child, which is obviously what I would say is the most expensive one on there, 22.1 million. Again, that's the one we struggled with in a couple budgets to keep up with. Our estimates were about 4.2% less than what we needed. Home hospital, even being off 10%, 1.1 million in context is not a huge amount. The one we've got to kind of circle back with the Office of State Budget Director on, I believe this falls in our plate, was the limited English population. I think we missed it, we being KDE and Che, the royal we there, not the Office of State Budget Director, so we'll take a blame for that one. The one that's kind of scary is property assessments. I want you to recognize how close, and I pushed that all back on the Office of State Budget Director. Their model hit that close. I really wish we could have placed a bet on that to see how close they could get, but I think that's very impressive that they got within 0.3% of every property assessment, motor vehicle, tangible, and real estate for 171 school districts. So I want to commend them for getting that number that close. That helps us a lot. So some of the information in the budget bill, I'll take you in the weeds a little bit. There's language that's been in the budget bill for quite some time that allows the movement between our budget units. So if I'm short in one bucket, I could reach over to another one where I have some excess funds. Without that, we're having a very different conversation. So I want to impress upon you the importance of that language. It saves the day a lot. Over the years that we've had, many districts may not even know we had a shortfall in one bucket, but we're able to move some extra money over there. And nobody knows except the budget folks that we're going to move this over to fill in this pothole. So it really does help us kind of close the books for the year and keep everybody in the green, which is obviously what we want to do. Also, because of that, the number you hear, 14.7 or 40 plus million, it's always a net number. It's a combination of those negatives and positives, and we're looking at a net number. So currently, and Matt addressed this a little bit, we're working right now. Statutorily, it's due March 1. We're very close to being at the end. As a matter of fact, should be maybe today we can communicate a number back to LRC staff here that we're still at 14.7 roughly. We had one small change, which is about $2,000 and change that we'll have to add to that. But we always communicate that as quickly as we can with staff because we know people are waiting on it. And the sooner people know, the more, we can work on getting that resolved. So right now, like I said, 14.7 million is the statutorily required shortfall. About 0.53% of the overall appropriation. Pretty close, but we don't like negatives, of course, and we don't like having to talk to districts about shortfalls. If we go into the three things that are, if funds are available, that's the language in the budget. There's two property assessment related things, and then there's January growth, which they're collecting right now. We don't yet know what January growth looks like, so that 40.6 million could go up. We don't expect a lot of January growth. It's a bigger hurdle, but it can be, several $100,000. It's just hard to pin down. So those are sort of optional, but that money obviously would reach out to quite a few school districts. So I don't want to say it's not important. It will hit quite a few school districts. So the problem we have with shortfalls, and this is why I think we work very hard to try to mitigate this to the extent possible, is with the $14.7 million loss. I think ballpark to give you context, for JCPS, their cut would be $1.3 million, but they have to make that cut in the current year. So it would the cut would show up in April, May, and June in their payments this year. So they're going to have to adjust their budget right now. And obviously they've signed contracts. They're well into the fiscal year. So making that cut, for some districts, it may be a hiccup. For others, it may be pretty rough. So we're very conscious of that, and that's why we obviously try to avoid that. And I'll take any questions, Chair.
Yes, we're going to start with Tina Bojanowski.
Thank you. So my first question is, do you happen to know how much of the dollar value of shortfall could be attributed directly to the virtual school in Cloverport Independent?
There was an estimation of about 500 students in growth for that district, and they wound up having about 2,066 students in growth. If you look at their growth by itself, they're entitled to $11.7 million in growth alone. Now, we did estimate for 500 students of that, but still there was, as you can see, probably 8-9 million of that was not anticipated.
If I may?
Yes, please.
And of course, based on their contract, that money goes directly to the for-profit operator and not to the district, is my understanding.
There is a large percentage that goes to the for-profit as opposed to another percentage that goes to the district, yes.
And if I may ask one more question.
Absolutely.
Thank you. So on special education, do you have a report that we could get on the specific eligibility areas that have increased, and
Yes.
maybe just those areas across the board, and then perhaps at a district level, so that we could kind of see, are there certain districts that have more or fewer students in certain areas?
Yes, ma'am. We do.
Thank you.
Just to kind of tag along with what Representative Bojanowski was saying, I completely understand that you were working with a lot of moving parts and putting everything together. I get it. I am concerned about the special needs area because they're identified many times before kindergarten. I don't. That's the mark I'm struggling with how it was missed.
I think where we need to strengthen our internal conversations is with not only the program area, but with the districts to understand. I've already got a call set up with JCPS. I expect to talk to Boone, Kenton, Campbell, Fayette, the larger districts. And then I also want to look at the districts, to Representative Bojanowski's question, that have shown an increase. And we've called several, and we've gotten various answers that, we've identified more because of A, B, or C, which, for me, it's very difficult to understand or to predict that. We need to understand, I think, like you said on the front end, if a 6-year-old comes in or a 5-year-old as a severe student, they're going to be at that district practically forever, and they should just be built in. They typically, students just don't move 22 times throughout their school career. So I think that's something we can strengthen and work on and understand a little better. But I take your point very well, Representative Banta.
Thank you. I guess, Commissioner, this would be your question. Do you think maybe you should take a look at those districts that have suddenly, or not so suddenly in the last year or so, had a surge in special needs students and make sure that they're following the procedure and making sure that, you try it with an ILP, and I mean, you know what I'm talking about.
We do a lot of monitoring through OCEO, our Office of Special Education and Early Learning. In that office, we do a lot of monitoring, trying to check on those numbers. For example, when the December special ed count comes in, we screen those. We try to find out from districts. I don't have the information with me, but there's a lot of screening that goes on through our office with that. But absolutely, and I can give you a real example as a former superintendent. In a small district, we went from somewhere around 15, 16% in 10 years of special education to around 21, 22% of our population in special education. And I don't feel like we were over-identifying. I just feel like that a lot of times as the population grew, those were the issues that we're having. I think that looking at the processes is very valuable, and we do that at the office, and that's something else we need to look more into.
Okay, thank you, because it just, our populations are declining, is what I'm being told, and it scares me, intrigues me, and makes me think we're probably not following something, that our special needs numbers are increasing.
Sure.
Something's going on. There's a disconnect there. Any other questions? Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you all.
This
Appreciate
was
it.
wonderful.
Very well.
Appreciate
Yes,
it very
very
much.
well.
Next, we have representatives from the Kentucky Education and Labor Cabinet presenting on the topic of unemployment insurance. If these representatives would please come to the front table and identify themselves for the record.
Morning, Madam Chair. My name is Jamie
Morning.
Link. I'm the Secretary of the Kentucky Education and Labor Cabinet. I'd like to ask my colleagues to introduce themselves as well.
Madam Chair, I'm Greg Higgins. I'm the Executive Director of the Office of Unemployment Insurance.
And I'm Callie Arnold. I'm the Legislative Liaison.
Okay.
And with
Thank
us
you.
on the front row is also the Deputy Executive Director, Andy Hudgens, in case we have any questions that we need to help address. Andy has that expertise as well.
Great. Thank you.
So we appreciate the opportunity to come over and discuss the unemployment insurance process as well as the current status. And I'd also, at the end, perhaps add a little bit about the future of what's coming with unemployment insurance. We were asked to come and discuss the processing of UI claims as well as the backlog that you've heard about.
It's switching on our screen, but not their screen.
So it's switching on our screen, but not on the monitors. IT support.
I might have done something wrong.
Is it on slideshow and it went from the beginning?
Mm-hmm.
And then can you go next? It's not doing it on screen. Let's start all over. How about
Okay.
that? And all else fails.
Reboot.
Okay, so that looks
That looks
different.
better. Yeah.
You want to try it now?
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Now we're back on track. So we'll talk a little bit about the claims process. When someone loses a job through no fault of their own, or someone separates from employment, they file an unemployment insurance claim. When they file that claim, they have to address some questions in order to complete that claim. Approximately half of the claims that are filed have no issues, and they immediately move on through the system and they're paid in a timely manner. For the balance of the claims, they may have issues that are varied. It could be multiple issues on any one claim. So those claims have to go to our adjudication branch, and they have to be examined for the facts behind the claim to make sure that it is a valid claim and that the claimant is eligible for unemployment insurance. Those claims, when they go to adjudication, are processed first in, first out, the oldest first through the most recent, because we want those older claims to be handled as quickly as possible. Both the employer and the claimant have the opportunity to present their facts to that claim should there be a dispute about whether the claimant is eligible or not eligible. Once a decision is made by the adjudication branch, If either party feels or disagrees with the decision, they can appeal that decision to our appeals branch. And when it goes to the appeals branch, unemployment insurance referee will review the case and request additional information from both parties and then make a decision about that claim. So that's the second decision that could be made. Then if the other party is still in disagreement with the claim, it then goes to the Unemployment Insurance Commission. That's the third level. And the Unemployment Insurance Commission will review all the facts. They'll talk to the parties involved, and they'll issue a commission order or a third decision on that claim. Then if either party is still in disagreement, that they have to go to circuit court to dispute that, and the circuit court will be the county of last employment.
How many do you have go to circuit court?
I don't know. We can get that information.
We have
for you.
about between 150 a year.
Okay, thank you.
Not a lot go to,
Yeah.
relatively speaking, to circuit court. Throughout the entire process, either party can present additional information as we go through the reviews. And I'd say that the ultimate goal is to make sure that we have a fair decision at the end, wherever the end might be, so that claim is either approved or it's disallowed. Obviously, when they go to the adjudication and the fact finding, that is the most time-intensive and extensive period of time when addressing a claim. And it's very detailed, and the investigation is very significant because of two reasons primarily. We want to make sure that the taxpayers are paying legitimate claims to eligible claimants, and we also want to protect the claimants to make sure that they are eligible for a claim, that they're not mistakenly paid for benefits that they're not entitled to, and then we have to go back, once it's discovered through post-audit or other means, we have to go back and say, you owe us that money back. So we have to get, it's called an overpayment, and they have to repay that. And I think many times, if not most, those monies have been spent, and that creates a hardship for that person to pay that money back. So some key points to talk about. I'd point out first that the only source of funding for the Office of Unemployment Insurance is federal funding from the U.S. Department of Labor. So on the funding side, since 2020, and we know what happened in 2020 and there forward, the Cabinet has requested additional funding from the General Assembly to assist with augmenting staff to address the volume of claims being received. Fast forward to October of 2023, post-pandemic, the U.S. Department of Labor reduced not only Kentucky's federal funding, but I think most states, if not all states. Looking at the upcoming federal fiscal year upon which the funds are based, we had to make the early and difficult decision to eliminate 49 positions because we just couldn't afford to keep them on. Those 49 positions consisted of adjudicators and call center staff. And I also point out that over the last two biennia, we have included a budget request to add additional positions to OUI to address the workload, and neither one of those requests were successful.
Okay, if I can interrupt.
Yes, ma'am.
With the federal positions, the last I read that you had either 6 or 7 of the federally funded positions that you haven't filled yet.
We're in the process of filling the vacant positions that we had available due to various reasons for people leaving, whether they be retirements or leaving for another job. But we try to fill vacancies as quickly as we can. Yes,
How
ma'am.
long have those been open? Because if I'm hearing about them, I'm low on the food chain, so.
Well, I wouldn't say that, but we go through the personnel process. We advertise the vacant positions, we accept applications, we review the applications, we schedule interviews, and then we make a selection and make an offer for the jobs. The time frame on particular positions, I'm not sure. We can get that information for you, but I don't have it at my fingertips right now.
Okay, that would be wonderful. Thank you.
So the current status of where we are right now, and as of February 3rd, that's the last time we pulled the data for this presentation, we had 8,900 individual claimants with almost 17,300 unresolved issues. And I'd point out that, as I mentioned earlier, each claim can have multiple issues. So sometimes when you hear numbers, there's a bit of confusion about is that number of people or is that the number of issues on a claim? So we had 8,900 and 17,300 unresolved issues. In a typical week, the adjudication branch staff, as it stands now, can reach a determination of about 2,000 issues per week. So going back to the impact of that reduced funding, the U.S. Department of Labor, their timeliness guidelines say a claim should be processed within 14 to 21 days from the time it's filed to a decision is made. Because of our staffing, we are at about 14 weeks at this point for claims that are in adjudication and fact-finding that it's taking to resolve those issues and make a determination of those claims. And that is seeking information from employers, seeking information from the claimant, trying to get to the information needed to make an informed decision on those. And as I mentioned, in November 23, because of the federal funding reduction, we laid off 49 staff. So looking at the bottom of the slide, a comparison of November 23 before the reduction in staff to currently in February 2025. In 2023, we had 58 full-time adjudicators with about 2,300 issues pending and making about 3,100 decisions each week. Essentially, the Office of Unemployment Insurance in November of 2023 was current and within the DOL guidelines. Today, after 14 months with reduced staffing, we have 32 full-time staff in adjudication and 6 part-time staff. We brought back some retired employees who have adjudication experience and knowledge to try to help with the adjudicated claims. Right now we're standing at about 17,700 issues still pending, and we're rendering about 1,000 decisions each week.
May I interrupt again?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. Unemployment is very low right now.
Yes, ma'am.
And so caseloads would be very low right now for adjudicators. Is that?
I think there could be a correlation there, obviously, because of the unemployment rate. But it depends on each individual claim and what issues each claim might have. And then we have seasonal layoffs. It ebbs and flows.
Okay.
We're in the winter months now, so the construction industry, manufacturing, agriculture, you have more people not working, and they're filing unemployment insurance claims. So it typically goes up in the winter months, and then with other extraordinary circumstances that may come about with a business closure or something like that that may impact the number of claims received at any point along the continuum. But right now we're seeing increased claims because of the seasonal layoffs.
Okay. Is the new UI technology, where's that at?
Can I come to that in just a few minutes?
Absolutely. That'd be great.
You're ahead of me, so good. I've talked about the funding, and the slide before you now is a proposal to help address that staffing shortage. As I mentioned, we had the layoff of 49 staff. So what we're proposing is to add 25 additional staff in our adjudication branch at a cost of about $2.6 million annually. We believe certainly that if we receive those positions, we would get back within the USDOL guidelines of 14 to 21 days to process claims. These 25 staff would be able to generate about 750 more decisions a week than we're able to right now. So the funding options that we would like to present is to reduce. Are you familiar with the Service Capacity Upgrade Fund, the SCUF fund?
No.
That is a fund the General Assembly enacted. I'm not sure which session it was, but it was to address the needs of unemployment insurance, and it's a fee that's tacked onto the employer's unemployment insurance payments. Once it reaches $68 million, which was projected for the new unemployment insurance system, that's supposed to sunset. So what we'd like to propose as an option is that we reduce the existing SCUF assessment from 0.75% 0.075% to 0.01125% to cover the cost of the additional staffing. And you can see at the end of that sentence is the language outlining what the SCUF can be used for. So with
We
that,
have, just sorry,
Please.
we have a question.
course.
Representative Bray.
Thank you all. Has at any point in unemployment in Kentucky unemployment history, has it been funded by general fund dollars, or has that always been federal funds?
it's always been federal funds, and I'll turn to Andy. Always been federal funds.
Okay, if you don't care, could we go back just a slide or two where you were discussing the November 2023 numbers and the
Sure.
February 2025 numbers?
Go back one more. One more. Oh, go forward. I'm sorry.
forward.
Yeah. One more. There you are.
All right, because I've put pen to, or pencil in this case, to paper here, and just when I look at the 58 full-time adjudicators in 2023, and I look at the average weekly average decisions issued at 3,115, I get 53.7 decisions per adjudicator per week, and at that point we were keeping up with the backlog. Is that correct?
That's correct.
All right. So when we look at February 2025, and I do the math on 32 full-time adjudicators and 6 part-time people, my math looks like about anywhere between 32.4 and 27.3 decisions per week. So it looks like the adjudicators are a lot less efficient by about half. Is there any particular reason for that? I mean, because it looks to me, even if we were to fund the positions, you all have 6 or 7 that you haven't filled yet. Even if we were to fund the positions today, they wouldn't come online for a few months, let's say. It takes a while to hire people. But then we've still got the issue of people only being half as efficient as they were in 2023. Is there any particular reason for that?
And I'll defer to my colleagues, but I'd start off by saying that certainly it depends on the complexity of each issue or each claim, but also to kind of preface the future, we awarded a contract last year that was effective July 1 for the design and implementation of a new unemployment insurance system. Well, we have to work with the vendor to help design and build the system, and that takes the expertise of a lot of current unemployment insurance staff. And they're typically the most seasoned, the most knowledgeable staff that have to participate with the design of that new system. So for the past, 7 months, several of those staff have been spending a good portion of their time working on the new unemployment insurance system, and then also trying to work on claims as their time allows. We pay overtime. We're doing everything we can within the budget that we have to keep everyone as busy. But I would say that a portion of it is the time and attention paid to the design of the new unemployment insurance system that will be implemented, as I'll present here in a little bit. But I don't know if Greg or...
Yeah, I can offer some explanation for that.
If you could come up to the microphone a little bit.
Sorry. Prior to November 2023, approximately half of the issues were disaster unemployment issue. That was a federal program implemented to help those that traditionally didn't draw unemployment. Independent contractors, self-employed individuals. Those issues are easily resolved. To be qualified for pandemic unemployment insurance, all you had to do is check a box or check one of 5 boxes to say that you were unemployed, you have a need, so they could be verified by looking at one document. So the issue could be resolved by looking at one document, seeing if they checked a box. If they do, then they're qualified. If they don't, then they're not. Normal unemployment insurance issues are are pretty complicated. You must first show you're monetarily eligible. You must next show that based on the reason for your separation, you're qualified. That means you were not discharged for misconduct or you did not quit without good cause. And then after that, you have to remain eligible weekly by showing that you're able, physically able to work, mentally able to work, searching for work, and if you're in any of the programs that exempt you from a work search, you have to prove those things. All of those have to be verified, investigated, and many of the issues you have to speak with both the claimant and the employer. It's a lot more time consuming than the PUA issues that made up roughly half of those pre-2023 group of issues.
So your all's numbers on the slide here, November 2023, were they processing these pandemic claims in 2023?
Yes, all the
Still
way
for independent contractors, for all of the COVID related claims are still being processed in 2023.
From 2020 through 23, we were still working on PUA issues.
Okay, thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Okay, thank you.
Okay, we'll go forward. One more. No, I'm sorry. Keeping up. So going back, I did want to point out that on the additional funding proposal, Governor Beshear and State Budget Director John Hicks have met with both House and Senate leadership and House and Senate A&R chairs to discuss this proposal, as well as the funding options before you. The second option that you see on your screen is that the General Assembly shift appropriations from another agency where it's not needed. That has been a part of the discussion between the Governor and State Budget Director and leadership and A&R chairs. If either one of these proposals is approved, it will have a net zero impact on the state budget. Okay. One additional measure that we would like to present is having the employer, requiring the employer to notify the employee at separation the reason for their separation. A good deal of time is spent verifying why the employee was separated from the employer, and that takes a lot of time going through the adjudication process. So if we can require the employer to provide that information upon separation or during their exit interview, that claimant will have that information that they can submit with their initial claim, which would help expedite the process. And you'll note there that 20 states currently have some type of this requirement in their unemployment insurance laws. Now, I talked about the future a little bit and wanted to give you an update on the progress on the new unemployment insurance system. And if I may, I'd like to ask Andy Hudgens to come up, since he's been intimately involved with that, to give you the best update that we can on that.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. For the past 8 months, I've been heavily involved in the design and development of our new unemployment insurance system. I can tell you we have the best staff, unemployment staff, assigned to this project. They take their work very seriously. We want to eliminate all the pain points and frustrations we have in our current system. They're not settling for nothing but the best. Deloitte's been a great partner in the process, and they understand our goals and our desires here. We want to make a system that the Commonwealth can be proud of, and we want to also make the best system in the nation. So we understand the assignment here, and everybody's dedicated to doing that. But the project, is like we've mentioned before, is designed to benefit both the claimants and the employers. It's being developed in 2 phases. The first phase is the tax phase, which has been completed. The requirement stage has been completed, and we're toward the end of the design phase right now. After the design phase, we head into the development stage, then user acceptance testing, and hopefully it'll be implemented in probably mid-2026 right now. It's kind of the target for the tax phase. The second phase is the benefits and appeals phase. It's the we're currently in the requirement stage of that, where you gather all the system requirements, and we're heading into the design phase. Probably this week, end of this week. That will last through the end of this year, and then we'll head into the development stage in probably 2027, with full system implementation expected in 2028. So everybody's working hard. Deloitte's been a great partner in this project, and we want to make a system that the Commonwealth can be proud of, and our staff can be proud of, and rid all of these frustrations that we've experienced over the years.
And I'd also add that during this period, we'll have to run two systems. We'll have to continue to run the existing system when we start to implement the new phases of the new project. We'll have to run that parallel to that. I believe that's accurate. So a lot of work yet to be done, a lot of hard work. But I think, again, this points to the term I use, we're trying to put 10 pounds of flour in a 5-pound sack. We've got reduced staffing that are trying to deal with the claims while also building the new system, and that's where we found our continually falling behind, and thus the need for the additional staffing. So with that, Madam Chair, that concludes our presentation, and we're happy to take any additional questions.
Representative Klein.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Are your employees back in the office 5 days a week?
We're working on the state government hybrid scheduling, 3 days in the office,
3-2.
2 days remote.
And
it depends on requirements.
Yeah.
If they need to be in the office to complete their duties, like working with the consultant to work on the system, employees will be in the office when they're required to be.
And another question, please.
Absolutely, go ahead.
The 25 new employees would be on the same 3-2 model, you think, with the
Initially,
explanation you just gave?
Initially, they'd have to work 5 days in the office until they have reached the point that we feel that they qualify for that hybrid schedule. And, not until then will they be allowed.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Can you just go back and explain the building the system? There was no purchasable system we could purchase out of all the states that have this?
This is we've testified about this several times.
I know.
That you may
I
not
just
remember. No, that's fine.
I
want to
loop back.
No, there was no off-the-shelf system. I think the pandemic laid bare not only Kentucky, but many, if not almost all states, had woefully inefficient unemployment insurance systems. Some had, in fact, started to replace their systems prior to the pandemic, but when the pandemic fell upon us, they realized that what they were doing wasn't going to be sufficient. So there were, I think, several efforts by different vendors, and the vendor community is fairly limited in this area. And I think I would have to research, but I think there's probably still some lawsuits taking place between states and vendors because of the implementation of their unemployment insurance systems. So we tried, let me get my dates right. I think it started in 2020 that we tried to get a vendor. We reached contract. The Commonwealth was ready to proceed. The vendor withdrew. So we had to go back out with another RFP. We reached a contract. The Commonwealth was ready to proceed. The vendor had some federal issues they had to deal with, and we did not want to be a part of that. So we canceled that procurement and went back out with the third RFP that led us to the selection of Deloitte. And that contract was awarded last spring, and implementation was July 1 of last year. So they had a base product that they had developed through the pandemic era as they were trying to address all the issues that were exposed during the pandemic and the huge demand. So now we're building on top of that base product to make sure it meets both federal and state legal requirements.
Okay, thank you. Are there any other questions? Okay. Thank you very much for your presentation. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
You guys have a great day.
You do the same.
Bye. We are currently scheduled to meet next Tuesday, February 18th, at the same time and place to hear information regarding the School Facility Assistance Fund audit. Seeing no further business before the committee, I will hear a motion for adjournment. Second. We're adjourned.